Mr. LeGrand, 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chairman Blackburn, Ranking Member Doyle, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Robert LeGrand, and I am the former Chief Technology Officer with the District of Columbia Government. I'm the former Program Executive for the National Capital Region's Interoperability Program. In this role, I led the district's land mobile radio upgrade and also led the development of the nation's first citywide 700 megahertz wireless broadband network for first responders. This network was considered a model for the nation and served as a testbed how broadband applications can be shared among public safety agencies. I left the DC government in 2007 and formed the Digital Decision. My firm leverages lessons learned from the district, the land mobile radio, as well as the 700 megahertz wireless broadband deployments to help states, locals, and even commercial customers prepare to deploy public safety broadband communication networks. I appreciate the committee's ongoing efforts to address this critical issue, and I thank you for the opportunity to present my views on FirstNet. It's important to remember that FirstNet was created to address the communications problems that have plagued public safety for many years, especially the lack of interoperability, which we spoke about so many times already, among our first responders. Along with my public safety colleagues, I believe that a dedicated public safety broadband network was what was needed to address the public safety requirements. In discussions with this subcommittee prior to the legislation being passed, I referenced my previous experience on working on a Seawolf-class nuclear attack submarine. No one would disagree that the Navy in our fleet is America's first line of defense. By the same token, no one should disagree that our first responders are our last line of defense, including their communication systems. Now, we would never consider a U.S. Navy and a Carnival Cruise Line partnership in order to cover the operating costs of a nuclear attack sub. So why would we rely on anything less than a fully funded, dedicated public safety broadband network for our first responders? Well, of course, that was not possible given the limitations of the available funding. I mean, that would have been $50 billion or more. But Congress was able to provide FirstNet, and they did a good job of putting this together, with spectrum and funding to support the development of a public safety broadband network and establish provisions to encourage the private sector involvement. Now, while many public safety officials, including myself, fought for a true dedicated public safety broadband network, what we actually got from FirstNet is access to AT&T's network with public safety features and functions along with it. Now, while that may have been necessary, and it was, given the limitation of funding, it was also means that we must look at this network and its competitive options for states to make sure that they have viable means to opt out from this commercial offering, because it is truly a commercial offering. Now, unfortunately, I do not believe, as Mr. Stevens had mentioned earlier, that the opt-out requirements established under FirstNet adequately preserve the state's rights to make their own decisions and consider competitive options for the network providers. This is especially troubling given that half the FirstNet spectrum, half of it, came from state and local governments. That sacrifice in spectrum makes state and local governments investors in FirstNet. At a minimum, states should have the same ability as FirstNet to develop a public-private partnership. States should be able to choose their preferred network provider and use that provider's core to serve its public safety users as long as that network core complies with industry standards and is interoperable with AT&T's network. If states are required to use a network core provided by AT&T, then that means that AT&T must provide service to their public safety users. This is not the kind of opt-out provision that public safety had in mind. States should not be subjected to stricter limitations or harsher penalties or fees than AT&T. Competition is the reason why the United States has the most advanced commercial LTE networks in the world, and competition must continue to ensure public safety benefits from the tremendous innovation and advances in communications. If there's one thing that the public safety communications industry needs, it's competition at every level. FirstNet decided that a public safety broadband network was not a dedicated one, was not achievable, and instead chose a commercial solution. FirstNet should therefore ensure that this approach is implemented on several key principles. First, it should include support vibrant and fair competition. It should include an open and non-proprietary devices and applications that are available to all providers. It should ensure that interoperability for all networks let me say that again. It must ensure interoperability for all networks that satisfy a minimum public safety standard. It should create incentives, not penalties, but incentives for private sector involvement that encourage broader industry support. And it should ensure a level playing field for the state's opt-out process. With this, I really appreciate the committee's time, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Gentleman yields back. That concludes all of our opening statements, and we're going to move to